My phone rang at 6:30 in the morning. It was my daughter Simone. "Dad," she said, her voice trembling, but not with grief. "Grandpa died last night, a stroke at the nursing home." Before I could respond, the phone was snatched away. My son-in-law Braden's voice slid through the speaker, greasy and triumphant. "Listen, Thad. The old man's gone, and he never signed that new trust. We found the 2010 will. Everything's Simone's. You have 3 days to pack your bags and get out." I put the phone on speaker and set it on the table. Across from me, my father, Moses King, 94 years old, a World War II veteran, was buttering his toast. He took a sip of black coffee, looked at the phone, then at me. "Is that right?" he whispered, gravel in his voice. "Well, then ask the boy what flowers I should expect at my funeral. I'm Thaddeus King, 40 years as a structural engineer, making sure buildings didn't collapse. But the biggest crack I ever found wasn't in concrete. It was in my own family. Today I'll tell you how a dead man planned his own funeral to teach the living a lesson they'd never forget." Braden's voice kept coming through the speaker, cruel and gleeful, talking about cremation packages and nursing home fees. Moses chewed his bacon slowly, unbothered. He hadn't drooled a day in his life. He beat me at chess 3 times a week. Braden didn't know that. Braden didn't know anything about the man whose fortune he was so eager to spend. 2 days earlier, Braden had convinced Simone to move Moses from his private care suite to Golden Horizon, a state-funded dump, claiming it was temporary. In reality, he was pocketing the $15,000 a month and dumping my father in squalor. But Moses King had escaped a POW camp in Germany in 1944. A sleepy night guard wasn't going to hold him. He walked out at midnight, called me from a gas station, and I smuggled him home. The nursing home, finding an empty bed, apparently found a convenient body instead, a homeless man who'd died overnight, and slapped my father's name on the tag, rather than admit they'd lost a patient. Moses stood, walked to the pantry, and opened a false back, a panic room he'd built in the 60s when the Klan was active in our county. "I want to see it," he said. "My funeral. Who cries, who cheers, how deep the rot goes." He told me to go identify the body, sign the papers, play the grieving son. 3 days, Thaddeus. Let them dig their own grave, and on the 3rd day I will rise. I drove to Golden Horizon, a place that smelled like neglect and looked like a prison. The director handed me a shoebox of personal effects that weren't my father's. Then he took me to the basement to see the body. It wasn't Moses. A stranger, thin, bearded, clearly someone who'd lived hard on the streets. I wept over him anyway, for the cameras, and while the director stepped out, I photographed the medical chart. It confirmed everything. Braden had been quietly transferring Moses to the economy ward while billing for luxury care, and pocketing the difference. This wasn't just elder abuse, it was fraud. I demanded an open casket, knowing it would panic the director into upselling me, and knowing Braden would never suspect I already had proof. Back at the house, Braden arrived with an appraiser, measuring walls, pricing my mother's antique clock, kicking her sofa, calling 40 years of history junk. Simone stood by, mouthing apologies, offering me an apartment in Pine Creek, code for out of sight, out of mind. I sat in my father's chair and absorbed every insult, because behind the pantry wall, on a hidden microphone, Moses was recording all of it. Then came the lawyer, a forged will, supposedly signed 3 months ago, leaving everything to Simone and Braden, calling me a financial burden. I examined the signature and nearly smiled. 5 years ago, arthritis forced my father to switch from writing right-handed to left-handed. Every document he'd signed since slanted backward. This signature slanted forward, a clumsy forgery. I said nothing. Instead, I negotiated. I'd sign a waiver giving up any claim, in exchange for 1 week in the house to grieve and pack. Braden, greedy for a clean exit, agreed instantly. He had no idea he'd just handed me exactly the time I needed. That night, Moses and I went to the bank's records together. His account, once holding $2 million, held $412.50. Braden had been draining it for 18 months. Into a crypto exchange, into oblivion. Moses reached for the phone to call the police immediately. I stopped him. If we move now, he spins it as a mistake. We wait for the funeral. Let him bury himself in front of the whole city. We took my father to a hidden speakeasy called the Velvet Lounge, where three old friends waited: a retired civil rights attorney, a retired police chief, and a former county medical examiner. These men had survived segregation and built this city from nothing. Together we built the plan. The John Doe would get a proper burial, quietly, with dignity. Braden's casket, the one he'd reluctantly paid $50,000 for after I shamed him into it, would be sealed, packed with sandbags and a hidden Bluetooth speaker, and delivered empty to the church. Retired detectives would sit in the choir loft. The press would be invited. Braden wanted a show. We were going to give him one. Before the funeral, I met Simone at the coffee shop that used to be ours. I wanted to believe she'd been coerced. Instead, she confessed the real reason for the theft. Braden had lost everything in reckless crypto bets and borrowed $2 million from loan sharks. They needed the estate to pay off men who'd threatened to kill him. She begged me to sign away my inheritance to save her husband's life. I told her the truth. She hadn't been dragged into this. She'd chosen him over her own grandfather. I left her crying in the booth, and something in me closed that day. The night before the funeral, at Braden's tasteless celebration of life party, he stood by my father's fireplace bragging to investors about modernizing the King legacy with stolen money. Later, alone in the funeral home's prep room, we loaded the casket with sandbags and hid the speaker in the pillow. Braden burst in, unannounced, paranoid, demanding it be sealed shut immediately, terrified someone might look too closely. He got his wish. He leaned over the casket and mocked my father directly, bragging about the Porsche he'd already ordered. Moses, listening through the live speaker, said nothing. Discipline. He was saving his voice for the stage. The morning of the funeral, the Cathedral of Hope was packed. 500 people, but almost none of them were my father's friends. They were Braden's bankers, developers, and society climbers. Simone sat beside me, shaking. Braden delivered a eulogy built entirely on fabricated deathbed scenes, claiming Moses had called him the son I never had and handed him the keys to the kingdom. Every word was a lie polished for the cameras. Then I made the call. A knock came from inside the casket, then another. The room went rigid. Braden froze mid-sentence. A third knock, and then the voice, my father's voice, amplified, furious, rolled out of the coffin. "You are a liar, Braden Thorne." The church erupted. A woman fainted. Braden staggered back, screaming that it was a hoax, a recording, a deepfake, until the voice named the exact crypto accounts he'd drained, the pawn jewelry, the loan sharks. He panicked and ordered the casket opened himself, tearing at the lid, screaming it was just sand, accidentally confessing, in front of 500 witnesses and a wall of reporters, that he already knew the coffin should have been empty. Then the back doors of the cathedral slammed open, and sunlight poured through. There sat my father, not frail, not dying, but upright in his wheelchair in full dress uniform, medals gleaming, cane in hand, flanked by his three old friends. I stood behind him and pushed him down the aisle, while the entire congregation sat in stunned silence. Moses took the microphone. He apologized for being late to his own funeral. He'd been busy meeting with his lawyers and the district attorney. He listed the crimes one by one: kidnapping, identity theft, wire fraud, and, because Braden had quietly cut off his insulin at the nursing home, attempted murder. Police stepped out from the sacristy. Braden collapsed to his knees, and in his panic, turned on the one person who'd trusted him completely, screaming that it was all Simone's idea, that she was the mastermind, that she'd forged the will herself. She stood in the pew, shattered, watching the man she'd sacrificed her family for throw her to the wolves without hesitation. The officers cuffed him and dragged him out screaming that he hoped she'd rot. My father and I walked out through the side door without looking back at her. It felt like abandoning her. It was actually the only way she'd ever learned to stand. Braden was denied bail and later convicted. 15 years, no plea deal, no mercy, thanks to bank records, forged signatures, and a nursing home director who flipped to save himself. Simone wasn't charged. Moses refused to press charges against his own blood, but he handed her an eviction notice and a restraining order on the spot, cutting her off from every property, every account, everything. "You have your law degree," he told her, kneeling on the police station floor. You have your health and your freedom. That's more than most people start with. I dropped a $20 bill beside her, the same 20 I'd tried to give her days earlier, and told her to take the bus. That night, my father shredded every old will in his study and replaced it with something new, the Moses King Community Trust. The entire estate, liquidated, would fund interest-free loans for minority entrepreneurs and full scholarships for students from the South Side. The house would remain the trust's headquarters and my home. Simone's inheritance became a single clause, a stipend equal to minimum wage, paid only if she completed 40 hours a week of volunteer service at a shelter or soup kitchen. Miss 1 hour, forfeit the month. She needs to smell the poverty she tried to ignore, Moses said. If she refuses, she starves. The tap is off, permanently. A year passed. Braden sits in a cell he'll occupy for another 14 years, blamed by no one but himself. Simone didn't go to prison. She built one of her own, then broke out of it. She sold her jewelry, moved into a small apartment, and took a real job as a social worker. She sends what she can. Once, a check for $75, with a note saying she'd fixed her own leaking sink with a wrench instead of calling a plumber, and that she hoped her grandfather would be proud. Now my father and I sit on the porch most evenings, watching the oak leaves fall. He's 95. Doctors said he wouldn't survive the trial. He's still here, out of spite as much as anything. The trust gave out 10 full scholarships last month and funded a young woman's bakery on 4th Street. That, Moses says, is the money finally sweating the way it should. We didn't win a lawsuit. We won our family back, what was left worth saving of it, and our dignity along with it. Braden had the keys to a kingdom and picked the lock instead of walking through the door. My father always says the same thing at sunset. The wolf came, huffed, puffed, but couldn't blow the house down, because this house wasn't built with straw. It was built with blood. We often treat the elderly as fading shadows, easy to exploit, forgetting they're the architects of the ground we stand on. True legacy isn't written in a will, it's written in character. If you try to bury the truth, make sure it's actually dead, because the wisdom of the past always finds a way to haunt the arrogance of the present.